Simi sat at a roadside canteen, happily munching on a large turkey drumstick while washing it down with her chilled Five Alive juice. The day had been long, and all she wanted was just a peaceful meal. Just as she was about to take another bite, her hand froze midair. A decayed, bony hand, detached from any body, crawled onto her table like a spider, reaching for her food. Simi's eyes widened in horror. She blinked twice, hoping her vision was playing tricks on her. "Maybe I'm just tired," she muttered while looking away. But then, a woman with 2 heads and 3 eyes swayed beside her, dancing to music only she could hear. Simi swallowed hard and gripped her fork tighter. "Not today, I beg," she whispered, pretending she saw nothing. She focused back on her food, determined to ignore whatever nonsense was happening around her. But just as she looked at her plate again, she gasped. Slimy, wriggling worms dropped from the decayed hand that had stolen her turkey. Simi's face contorted in pure disgust. She wanted to scream, but her mouth was still stuffed with turkey. She considered calling the food vendor, but deep down, she knew no one else would see what she was seeing. Can't I just eat in peace?" she grumbled while grabbing her bag. This was not the kind of walla she signed up for today. On her way home, still shaken by what she had witnessed, Simi noticed something strange. By the roadside, 3 bush dwarves, tiny creatures with human-like faces, were locked in a heated fight. Simi paused and folded her arms. Small children like you, fighting like market women. And you even have the guts to do it in broad daylight. What kind of bad upbringing is this? She scolded without minding she is not talking to humans. The 3 bush dwarves froze and slowly turned to face her. "Wait. You can see us," one of them asked with his eyes widening in shock. "And you even dare interfere in our affairs," another one added. Simi scoffed while placing her hands on her hips. "Which kind nonsense question be that? Of course, I can see you, or do you think I'm blind?" The bush dwarves exchanged glances. They were now visibly irritated. How could a mere human, one that wasn't even up to 40 years old, insult them, an ancient beings who had existed for over 5,000 years? "You must be very foolish," Simi continued. "Look at your small bodies, yet you're behaving like thugs. You have no home training at all." Before she could finish, a long cane appeared in the hands of the bush dwarves. "You have no right to see us, and you have no right to talk to us," one of them snapped. And just like that, they landed the first stroke on Simi's back. "Oh!" Simi screamed and took off running. But the bush dwarves ran after her with their tiny legs moving faster than she expected. As Simi bolted through the village with her arms flailing and her mouth screaming, the townspeople stopped and stared. What is wrong with Simi?" one woman whispered. "Why is she running and shouting like this?" another man asked while shaking his head. "Hope she has not run mad," an elder muttered. Simi didn't care what anyone thought, she just knew she had to get away before these tiny demons beat her to death. She disappeared down the road, screaming for her life as the invisible bush dwarves chased her with their canes. Simi ran until her legs felt like jelly. Finally, she collapsed onto a heap of sand, sweating and panting like a goat that just escaped slaughter. "What kind of walla is this?" she muttered while wiping her forehead. "Is this how my life will be?" As she tried to catch her breath, a delicious aroma wafted through the air. Simi's nose twitched. Who is cooking like this?" she whispered while sniffing like a hungry dog. The scent was just too good to ignore. She followed the smell like a possessed detective, weaving through trees until she stumbled upon a mysterious wooden pot at the foot of a large tree. Inside the pot, steaming hot food sat invitingly, rich, thick soup with assorted meats floating on top. Goat meat, bush meat, and something that looked like perfectly grilled turkey drumsticks. Simi licked her lips. "Wow, finally, something good today. At least since these useless spirits didn't allow me to finish my food, this will serve as my compensation." She glanced around and there was no one in sight. "Finders keepers," she whispered, grabbing the pot. She carried it to a shaded spot, sat down and devoured everything inside. She ate to her fill, stretched and lay back while rubbing her stomach. "Best sleep ever," she mumbled while drifting off to sleep. Simi's peaceful nap ended abruptly. She opened her eyes and gasped. She was no longer under a tree, She was in the middle of a dense eerie forest, surrounded by tall figures dressed in leaves, their skin resembling tree bark. They weren't smiling, they were chanting in strange languages Simi doesn't understand. Simi sat up in terror. Who are you people? One of them stepped forward with his face twisted in rage. Human, why did you eat the food that was not meant for you? Simi blinked. Oh, but that food belonged to the tree spirit bride, our chosen one. She was supposed to eat it before marrying our son. Simi's stomach twisted. Oh. So I just stole a spirit wife's food. Yes, and now, you must face the consequences. Simi barely had time to react before they pounced on her. They beat the living daylight out of her. Oh. It was just food, no, Simi cried as they dragged her through the forest. Silence, one of them snapped. For your crime, you shall work as our slave for a whole week. Simi collapsed to her knees. Or just because of small food. Her protest fell on deaf ears. They forced her to do impossible tasks, fetching water from a river that disappeared when she approached, carrying firewood that kept doubling in size, and sweeping an endless forest path that never got clean. Simi cried every day, pleading for mercy, but the tree spirits showed her no pity. Finally, on the 7th day, she collapsed feeling exhausted. Your punishment is over, one of them said. Before she could respond, everything went black. When Simi opened her eyes, she found herself back in her village, but something was wrong. Her legs wobbled as she dragged herself home, her once radiant beauty now faded and her clothes tattered. She looked like someone who had fought 100 wars and lost all of them. The villagers gathered whispering. Simi, is that you? A woman gasped. Oh, where have you been for 1 whole year? An elder asked with his face filled with shock. Simi's eyes widened. 1 year? No, I was only gone for 1 week. The villagers exchanged concerned glances. She must have suffered some kind of trauma, one of them whispered. Let's take her inside to rest. Simi was too weak to argue. As she stepped into her house, her mother rushed out with her eyes wide in disbelief. Simi, is it really you? Before Simi could answer, her mother bent down, grabbed a handful of sand, and threw it on her. Mommy! What are you doing? Simi shouted while stepping back. I need to be sure you're not a ghost, her mother replied with her eyes still filled with fear. Simi groaned. I just came back from Wala and now my own mother is pouring sand on me. Her mother pulled her into a tight hug, tears streaming down her face. Where have you been, my daughter? Simi sighed deeply with her body still aching. Mommy, you won't believe me even if I told you. When Simi settled in, her hands trembled as she checked her phone. No, this can't be right, the date was 1 whole year ahead. Simi's mouth hung open, so time really moves differently there. She sank onto the floor with her mind racing. This whole problem started the moment I put that drop of dog tears in my eyes, she murmured. I've been suffering, seeing spirits, getting flogged by dwarves and nearly becoming a ghost wife. But wait, why am I crying? A sly smile crept across her face. No, I can't just suffer for nothing, she leaned back while rubbing her chin. People pay prophets millions just to hear about their enemies, and me, I can see real spirits live and direct. Simi's eyes gleamed with mischief. I'll start my own ministry. She let out a soft chuckle, then a full-blown laugh. Oh, this is a brilliant idea. With a renewed sense of purpose, Simi lay back and drifted off to sleep, already planning her next move in her mind. Simi woke up with a renewed determination. Today marked the beginning of her new destiny. She walked into the living room, beaming with confidence. Good morning, my people, I have an announcement. Her family gathered, exchanging puzzled glances. Simi cleared her throat and clasped her hands dramatically. For the past year, I have been on a divine mission. I was called by God himself. God? Her mother said as she arched a brow. Yes. I have been chosen as a prophet, and it is time for me to begin my work. Silence filled the room. Her siblings stared at her in disbelief. So, you mean you now see visions? Her younger brother asked while folding his arms. Exactly, Simi nodded boldly. Her mother sighed and whispered to her husband, this girl has finally run mad. But since no one could argue with God's calling, they hesitantly agreed to support her.